So dear chess lovers, let's introduce today's episode with this game was played by Greco in 1620. It's white to play, folks. How should white play this position? Greco has sacrificed the pawn on g2 to reach this position, and now the queen is attacked on h5. Please find a nice sequence for white in this position, and we'll take it from there. You're a great player, folks, if you came up with the entire sequence of g takes h7 check, knight takes h5, and bishop g6 mate. It's forced mate in 2. Can you visualize it, folks? Today we are talking about visualization and potential errors when we are visualizing while calculating in chess. Was it difficult or was it easy for you to find this short sequence? Only 3-ply calculation. G takes h7 check, forces knight takes h5, and bishop g6 is the key move that you should have seen from this position. I start with an easy puzzle first just to highlight what we are talking about today, because many players would miss this move. Sometimes because of lack of mating patterns, let's say, right? You should see this king as almost a mated piece on this diagonal. If a piece arrives on this diagonal, then the game is over. But maybe what is missing for many players is that after g8-7, they don't see that in this particular position, the g6 square is vacated for the bishop. Why? Because they might still think in their mind's eye that there's a pawn on h7 for black, right? Because this pawn was here in the initial position, but the pawn disappeared after you start calculating. So in your imagination, you should not confuse yourself that there is no more pawn on h7 for black. Thus, bishop g6 is a good move in this position. So a retained image error would mean that in your mind's eye, already captured pieces or moved pieces are still there in your mind's eye. You see, you must have had similar problems before in your chess life. You visualize something, you calculate the sequence, there's a pawn capture, for example, but in your mind's eye, the pawn remains on its initial square. So you don't update your working memory with this new information, because right now, right, when you looking at the board right now, the pawn remains on h7, but in your visualization, that pawn is gone because you first start with the move g takes h7, right? But of course, we cannot make those moves on the board while we are calculating in chess. This has to take place in your mind's eye. So today I will show you some instructive positions that will test for the skill of retained image in chess, whether you can update your working memories or whether you keep failing in these tasks, which means it's good information to get about yourself, folks. So this was an easy puzzle. g8-7 literally forces knight takes, otherwise it's mate on the board, so it's a very forcing calculation, but many players would miss bishop g6. Also, I would say they would miss it because right now there's a pawn on g6 for white. Right? It's like 2 times more difficult because right now the pawn is on g6, thus there is no bishop g6 right now, and also there's a pawn on h7. So how come in just 2 moves, right, just 2 plies, those 2 pawns are cleared from the board, thus allowing for mate on the board? So this example, I think, to my mind, is a clear case that illustrates what we are talking about in today's episode. By the way, g7 is also a good move, folks. Maybe you come up with this move, but I mean, okay, you get a new queen, obviously, right? That's okay. But yes, we are still winning, but who wants to go here, right? Who wants to go for this line? I mean, you're not going to mate the enemy king in 2 moves. Yes, we are still winning, but we want to finish the game as quick as possible, right? Without suffering too much. Yes, you're still winning in this position if you find all these sequences, but in this position, g8-7, the forcing sequence, was meaning much more easily. Why? Why g takes h7? Because you want to remove that pawn which was guarding the g6 square. So you cannot miss that the bishop can appear on the next move on this square. By the way, folks, if you go back to the very beginning, see how Greco won this game. We are talking about 1620. Black player commits a chess crime with f5 that weakens their king, and Greco punishes them like this. He says, please take my pawn, please take my rook, because you're losing on the king side. Queen h5 check is a beautiful move, forces this, and here you see, he already starts the entire combination here by taking on g6, and black has no defense against this, because if you take my pawn, right, that's easy to understand, just mate on the board. Well, if the king has no escape score anyways, and knight f6 was the only try, then we ended up in this position that allows mate in 2 for white. In this position, folks, it was black to play. Please take a stock, evaluate the position, equal material, black as the bishop pair, and a better pawn structure. So if black simply took the bishop and castle long, black will be having a beautiful game, right? Much better pieces, rook t2s are coming, and a better pawn structure. But in the actual game, instead of taking on e3, black made a move, which I won't execute on the board, but I will actually describe to you the reason he played that. He looked at this rook on e4, he saw this as a, well, is a terrible defender, right? Because that rook is paralyzed in defending the bishop on e3. So black player thought himself, wouldn't it be nice to remove the defender with the move f7, f5, right? Wouldn't that be nice to chase that rook from defending the bishop and thus win material? What was he missing, folks? You tell me, what was he missing? To my mind, maybe he doesn't even know that en passant rule exists in chess, right? That's a more plausible explanation. Maybe he doesn't know how en passant works, but the alternative explanation is that after e takes f6, he didn't see that this pawn on f5, which is attacking the rook, disappeared from the board while you're also giving check to my king. So sometimes even people miss such resources that after en passant, you see the newly moved pawn in your visualizations will be removed from the board. So they can't see, even like one ply deeper, they may not see that after e takes f6, this pawn on f5 is no longer hitting that rook on f5, and your whole idea basically collapses in its own weight. I will show you a beautiful segment in one of Fischer's game to highlight my point. It's white to play here, folks. Please, if you didn't see this position before, that's a great calculation exercise for you. You will love this position, I'm sure. It's a great visualization exercise too. White to play and win. You have a winning combination here, but for that you need to stop the video, take it slowly, ask yourselves what the position demands, what's it about basically, and then we're gonna talk from there, okay? Let's do it together, folks, the orientation phase. Our pieces are targeting the black king on h8. This is the weakest point around the black king, right? And our bishop can potentially combine with our queen to give mating threats. So, given this observation phase, e5 is a great candidate. So, first of all, please calculate the move e5. e5 looks winning directly at first sight, right? Looks like black has no defense. I'm going to be hitting your knight as well. And how are you going to defend your king side, basically? It just looks like game over. But here lies the devil. You need to look at the opponent's best moves against your good-looking ideas in chess. So e5, please, folks, tell me, what will black play against e5? I won't be on the board. I will only talk about the moves in today's episode. You're a great player if you found black's only defense f5 against e5. Now, please visualize. You go e5 and black plays f5. Can you keep that position in your mind's eye, in your working memory, and tell me what's going on at that moment, folks? No arrows. I will remove the arrows. Only speaking to the moves, right? e5 and f5. What are you seeing at that moment? What's going on? Can you update that new board information? Folks, what I'm seeing is that the queen is hitting our queen on h5. And maybe you missed that, basically, right? Maybe you thought, it doesn't matter. After e5, f5, I can take on f6 en passant, and I'm still winning the game because of this, right? You might have totally missed, for example, that the queens are now eyeing each other at that moment. And if you trade the queens, then that knight survives. You cannot win that knight on d6. And black is totally fine. His king will be safe. So e5, f5 is a bummer, because also maybe you missed that f5 is shutting down the entire diagonal, right? That will be a retained image problem. Maybe you saw e5, but after f5, maybe in your mind's eye, the pawn is still not blocking your bishop. Maybe you think that your diagonal for the bishop is still open, and maybe you're seeing mate on the next move, right? Please be honest with yourself, folks. Have you fallen for the same mistake as I'm describing in this video so far? Most of you mortals, including me perhaps, when you're visualizing this move after f5, you're still thinking that h7 is hanging You don't see the updated board information. Now there's a pawn on f5. In your mind's eye, the pawn is still somewhere on f7, and you're imagining that you're mating the black king on this move. Thus, you're committing a retained image error in visualization of the chessboard. It's only one ply deep. I'm showing you easy examples today, right? Only one ply deep. I ask you to only look at, two plies, so to speak. One ply for white and one ply for black, right? Just only two plies deep. I want you to just imagine in your mind's eye this position and evaluate it overall. Are you liking for white or black, right? Put it this way. Do you think this favors white or black? E5 and f5 insertions. And if you spend enough time on that position while thinking through your visualizations, you must tell me that it's actually black who is liking that transformation, right? Because now this knight is hanging, this queen is also, well, they're offering a queen trade, everything is hanging, and their king will be secured on the king side. So the conclusion is that e5 is not a good move because of f5. Thus, can you please tell me, folks, which move Fischer played here? And now we are talking about progressive deepening. We are talking about derived move in chess. We are talking about you analyze one move first and you gain information about the position, and then you change your very first move to take away that defensive resource from the opponent. I made a video about this. I will post a link on the video description. It's called Cutoffs Ideas and Cutoffs Trees. Okay? So, congratulations, folks, if you found Fischer's move Rook f6 in this position. I won't put it on the board. I will only talk about this move. I will only talk about this move in terms of like laying down my thoughts to you. I want you to visualize Rook f6 right now on this moment, right? Rook f6 will be played, and what's the point of Rook f6? Well, very simple. You're stopping the f-pawn from moving forward, right? Because that's the only way for black to limit your bishop and queen on their attack against the point of h7, right? Rook h7 is totally designed to stop the opponent's idea. So Rook f6 is on the board. What can black play at that moment? If they take our rook with the bishop, what's your next move? You tell me. Of course, e5, right? e5 is coming, and our bishop is becoming a happy piece. Now we are combining on this weakness on h7, and black, does black have a response? Can black play f5 at that moment, folks? Can you please tell me whether f5 is possible at that moment? If you think f5 is still possible, again, you failed for the retained image problem. Because why? Why? Because the board is updated. Now there's a bishop on f6. But in your mind's eye, the bishop is still here, and the pawn is still on f7, and the pawn can still move, right? That will be another version of retained image problem. So let's prune this line, folks. Rook f6. What if they take our knight on c3? What's our next move? e5 again, of course. And can you see a defense for black? I don't see it. If they go h6, of course, we will take the pawn on h6 with our rook. Bishop takes, queen takes, followed by mate on the next move. Correct? On h7. Queen h7 is mate. I won't put it on the board. I want you to follow my calculations and visualizations, folks. Rook f6 is designed to block the f-pawn. If you take my knight, comes e5. If you take my rook, comes e5 again. And your pawn on f7 is still frozen. And I will take on h7 on the next move. There is no way for the knight to block my bishop's diagonal, right? My bishop and queen are nicely coordinating at that moment. And I don't see any defense for black at that moment. And that's exactly why Fischer went ahead and played the move Rook f6, double exclam, beautiful move, blocking sacrifice. Why? Because we are blocking the f-pawn from moving forward. Isn't it lovely, folks? Isn't it beautiful? Bishop f6, e5. We saw all this. It will be a big mistake, as I told you. If you thought f5 is still possible in this position, then it's a clear retained image error. Otherwise, after e5, you see, we looked at these ideas. The knight cannot block our bishop. And if king g7 doesn't change anything, just mate on the board, right? Otherwise, it ends up in a mate. After e5, if they try f5, we also looked at this. If you start with e5, we saw f5. It will be a retained image problem. If you still thought that you can mate on h7, right? This means you're not updating your memories, working memories with this new information. And pawn moves can easily be missed, by the way, folks. Just like in Greco game, I noticed that pawn moves, people keep missing those pawn moves in their calculations, right? This also happens a lot of times with pawn moves. Either pawn recaptures, pawn captures, or just pawn pushes, like moves like this, right? It's when you're calculating, sometimes you miss the new information, so to speak, when the pawns are moving in chess. So one way of fighting against this is, if there's a pawn capture, to talk to yourself. Let's say f takes e6, takes. Just talk about this capture side as well, just to, make it more salient for you that something has changed. F takes e6 when you're visualizing, or f7, f5 or something. Like, find a cue for yourself to maybe make yourself more alert to these changes in the pawn structure while you're calculating, right? e5, for example, you can say f7, f5, f7, f5. Just find a way to make the change more salient, because right now that pawn is sitting on f5 if you go e5 in this position. And you need to be very accurate in that position to see everything crystal clear. Otherwise, a single slip and the whole calculation fails, unfortunately. Again, Fischer's move, rook f6, and he won the game in a very, very beautiful fashion. Now, white player played the move rook b3 here. That's a very nice game from Max Euwe with the black pieces. And while we were doing a guess the move training here, me and my student, both of us, have failed for retained image mistake. We went wrong here with black. We couldn't find the best move because of this error, that in our visualization, some change wasn't updated. Some crucial change was not updated properly. So please, folks, can you do better than us in this position? Black to play, I want you to calculate the consequences of queen takes g2, right? Because that's the most forcing move here. Obviously, this should be analyzed deeply. So is it working for black or not? Can you see a win? Can you see a clear win for black by capturing on g2? That's my key question. Does it work? Is black winning? If black is winning, please tell me 2 key lines that gives a winning position, okay? Rook b3 is on the board. You should be careful about the opponent's counterplay, right? You're seeing some issues, maybe rook b8 followed by some queen f5s if you're not careful, right? Just to tell you that there's also some counterplay that you need to be careful about in this position, correct? So please stop right now. Please stop the video. You can even set this position on a physical board. That's a great calculation exercise. That's a great visualization exercise, and you'll be rewarded if you give your best to this position, folks. Okay? So assuming that you spend enough time in this position, I will tell you the answer, and I will tell you what we went wrong in that position. I won't put it on the board. I will first speak out loud just to tell you what we were looking at while we were solving this problem. Queen takes g2, king d3. We thought king d3 is annoying for us because if you now capture the free rook in our visualizations, we were allowing rook b8 check, king f7, and queen f5 check. And this was so annoying for us. Me and my student, we spent maybe 15-20 minutes here in this position, try to find really whether that's a clear win for black or whether white is counterplay. You see, again, queen takes g2, king d3, queen takes f3. Yes, we won a rook, but white has queen and rook, right? They will gain some counterplay. So rook b8 check, of course we have to check for this, forces king f7. At that moment, we believe that white has this check on f5 with the queen, and who knows what's going on. We might be even losing that because then the queen is invading our camp, queen d7 will follow and so on. Just looks crazy difficult, right, to calculate. And black has to make sure that you don't give this counterplay to white, correct? So in our mind's eye, queen takes e2 was unclear, because if after king d3, if we are supposed to exchange the queens, well, that's a rook endgame, right? And his rook is very active. He will come here, create all the counterplay. How are you going to win this? I don't want to go to rook endgame here in this position. You see, we struggled in this position with queen takes g2. Because to our mind's eye, queen takes g2, rook f2 is easy. And you tell me, please, if they go rook f2, what is the finishing blow? That's actually easier to calculate. That's very forcing, folks. We take on f2, king takes f2, rook h2 skewer wins the queen on c2. Can you see it, folks? Queen takes g2, rook f2, queen takes f2 check, king takes f2, rook h2 check, followed by rook takes c2. That line is much more forcing, direct, easy to calculate. But queen takes g2 check, king d3. I don't have any other meaningful checks. I don't want to trade the queens. Well, and if I take the rook on f3, it looks like I'm giving you all the counterplay. So, I hope you did better than us, folks. Can you see my mistake? Can you see my visualization error here? I hope you did better than me. I hope you updated your memories nicely, because after king d3, the queen has no longer access to this f5 square, right? That's how we went wrong. We thought after rook b8 check and king f7, queen f5 was still an option for white. But we forgot about the fact that in this line, the king is blocking the queen from reaching f5, correct? And that's why Max Oyve saw better than us, and he went for this line, folks, and he won the rook for free. You see? Because here the queen is blocked, cannot do this check after rook b8 and king f7. There is no queen f5 check. And that's a game changer, because this rook has, well, only a couple of checks left. My king will come closer, 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 and this queen has no longer check because of my rook, right? And I have an extra rook with a completely winning position. That's how the game went, folks. He took on g2, and in fact, white player went like this, and this leads us to the other line. I show you that's much more easier to calculate, nothing complex about this. But you see, in our mind's eye, before we take on g2, we had to make sure that we can win the rook for free on the next move, and this involves you actively search for the opponent's forcing replies, correct? So congratulations, seriously, congratulations, if you saw that in this move, in this line, this updated information means that the queen has no access to f5. So then I ask myself, why did we went wrong here, right? Because both of us, it was so obvious for us that in this position, we had to trade the queens, right? I don't want to enter a rook endgame here, because who knows what's going on there. And in our mind's eye, the queen could access f5. So what are the conditions for us then to get better at this, right? When you're visualizing this position, going back, when you're visualizing this position, queen takes g2, king d3, right? Maybe we should make it more salient to ourselves, that d3, king d3, right? Maybe if you just say it by 5 or 10 times, we might actually wake up to the option that now queen f5 is no longer an option, right? Because if you too much focus on the opponent's counterplay, it looks risky, you know? These pieces are coming. And especially if the queen is sort of, ending up on f3. Because yes, it looks like from afar, if you do this and take on f3, well, you're giving away the square, right? So superficially, that looks very risky. So the key visualization that you have to refute this idea for white is to know the placement of the king on d3, actively blocking their queen's access to this square, correct? Incredibly beautiful. Only, by the way, only 3 ply deep. It's a very short calculation. Just look at this. 1 ply, 2nd ply, and 3rd ply, right? By all means, you can stop here, because that's obviously the case that this rook itself is not enough to give anything dangerous to our king, right? Our king can come all the way through. The important thing is to limit their queen. And the f5 square was the key. Because imagine that in this position, right? Imagine this position, this king will be somewhere else. Let's say on b2, right? Then queen f5 would be so annoying for us, don't you think? So, you see, folks, how do we get better at this part of chess, that we don't fall for these retained image issues? That was the key question that I asked you in this episode. Please give me feedback on YouTube. Do you have similar problems in your visualizations? What did you do to tackle this problem? How do we make those things more salient to keep updating our working memories properly and to make things crystal clear, or at least as clear as possible? I will leave you guys with this homework position. It's white to play in this position, and please tell me which move Smyslov found with the white pieces that won material for white. White to play and win, that's a very nice position. Only 3 ply calculation, very short calculation, but you need to see and visualize some things very accurately to solve this position. This connects to today's episode: retained image problems, maybe pawn moves, pawn recaptures, changes in the pawn structure, all these things you will be consolidating with this puzzle, folks. And please give me your ideas about this video. I am very curious to hear your thoughts about this. What should we be doing to help tackle this problem? There's a Soviet psychologist, Krogius, who wrote a book about this, Psychology in Chess. Well, it was about psychology, but in that book, he mentioned this problem. He called this retained image problem, right? Let's say your bishop is exchanged, but you're still thinking that the bishop exists on the board, right? You're sort of perceiving phantom threats of a piece that actually left the board, or pawn structure change, or the position I just showed you today, right? The idea is that we don't update the board information properly. And please tell me, what are the conditions for us to get better at that, right? Can we use some heuristics, mental tools, maybe, verbalizations like, pawn takes, and things like this, right? Just to make it more salient of all the changes that are taking place on a chessboard. Yes, visualization is a big part of chess calculation, and there are different techniques of getting better visualization. Maybe more videos about this later on to talk about visualization part only, right? But I think this was a good start for the whole discussion. Or maybe we should all learn from Elizabeth Harmon in looking at the ceiling while solving these visualization problems. Maybe that's a great advice to give. Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this video, and I will catch you on the next episode, folks. Thank you so much.